And John Mollicone, if you'll join us, that would be great. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Tim Healy, and we're going to talk about how the boat, or first of all, how the conditions were today, and then the differences between today and yesterday, and the changes that you have to make in the boat on how you tune it, but also how you sail the boat, because it's very, very different from yesterday. So, Tim?
Thanks, Chip. So, we also have Will and Carter White that are on their way down, if they can hear me. But I'll start out with asking Mike Ingham here. He had a good day today. So, Mike, one of the things that was going on, and we talked about in our boat a lot, was shifting gears. The puffs were coming down, and then you'd be a little bit overpowered temporarily, and then there'd be times where it'd be light, leaning in, and choppy, and you're just trying to power through the waves. So how did you handle shifting gears?
So shifting gears today, the number one priority was body weight. So body weight first. So if we got a puff, we would all try to move as somebody called down the puff. Say puff at 3, 2, 1. The crew knew to move out, and they do the best they can. And same with the lull. But then we use the number of bodies in. Like so, the 3 people on the deck, I'd say, the lull would come and I'd say 2 in or 3 in, and so they do their best, and then I'd modify it with that, based on trying to keep a really neutral helm. And if I felt like if I started to round up too much, I'd say 2 out, 1 out, whatever it was. So that was the very first thing. The second thing we did is once you were everybody was fully hiked, and I would say full hike, which they knew they weren't supposed to move anymore, and then I would do the rest with backstay. Pull the backstay on a little bit. And then I thought it was pretty important to actually, when I put the backstay on, I'd actually trim the main more, maybe even drop the traveler to make sure my forestay was pretty tight. And so the last resort is easing the sheet, and we didn't have to do that today. So it was body weight first, and then backstay if we needed to.
Thanks, Mike. Will, so same question. I asked Mike, what shifting gears today? You had some puffs that were a little overpowering, sometimes there were lulls and chop. What were you doing to power the boat up in the lulls and depower in those puffs?
Today was a lot different than yesterday. We were primarily crew weight, in and out, and then backstay when it got a little breezier. But those are our main controls. When we were max hiked, then we started trimming the backstay. Never ran out of backstay, so I never really played anything else.
So one of the questions we had when we were getting ready was, how high was your traveler, and how did that move when the puffs came on?
So in the lighter air, we were all the way up, and we twisted off the main a little bit. And then as we were fully hiked, then I eased the traveler down about 6 inches, and we lived there the rest of the day primarily.
So a question for John. So that handles the main a little bit. Now Genoa, we talked a little bit on our boat about Genoa trim and what was working better. So John, can you talk a little bit about Genoa trim through the puffs and lulls?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about all of you, but the boat didn't feel great going upwind in that first race, obviously. With current with you, it felt terrible driving. And so, I try not to trim the Genoa in as hard as I normally would. I wanted the boat to just feel a little better and free up a little bit. And once in a while, I would maybe go in 2 inches off the spreader, but I probably averaged about 3 inches off the spreader tip. Boat just felt a little bit more released and a little bit better. It made me just have a little bit more helm, felt better. The last race, the breeze picked up, felt better because it was a little bit windier. And we actually went up on the rig to 24-21, I think. And I still sailed. I felt the best when I was eased out about 3 inches off the spreader tip. But there was a lot of times we'd get out left in the strong current, and we felt like we were really ranging up to the windward mark, and we would just sail a little bit more bow down mode, making sure we weren't going to be overstood in the end. And the boat always felt really good, just keeping the bow down a little bit more eased out. So we were definitely playing it. It was only maybe a 1 or 2 inch range at the most. but we're playing it a little bit here and there, and probably similar timing to when we were playing the backstay, like you guys are.
So John, I have another question. Starting was tricky today because the especially later on when the current was pushing you over and they had the U flag up, so everybody's worried about getting pushed over. So John, what was the strategy on the start and also communication on the boat? How did you handle that today?
Yeah, we were lucky. We had 2 good starts today. We were really methodical about our line pings, and I think the Velocitech came in really handy today. I don't think I've ever really relied on it as much as I did today, and felt pretty comfortable with it. But our bow guy did a terrific job of kind of being, that just listening to him first, and then keeping my eyes on the Velocitech. And our trimmer Paul Abdullah would kind of, he would keep an eye on it too, and say where we were. And then ultimately the tactician Tim on our boat, if he says go, I would go. Or if he says you got to go down, he's my last. I'm listening to him in the end. He's the tactician. He sort of makes the ultimate call in the end. Up until that point, I'm really listening to my bow guy for the most part, and my eyes and my ears are kind of following the Velocitech a bit, and it was really helpful today. So, we usually find when we're coasting up to the line, we're probably ticking off about, it seems like about a meter a second. Does that seem about right? You guys agree with that? And then, but when you have that positive current, it was obviously more like probably a half a meter a second. So it was a lot quicker. And so just being really careful, being conservative.
Yeah, so it's 2 meters a second. So yeah, I agree with that. So I think the big thing with communication that on all boats, we say a lot of J70s as well, is to make it clear when you're using the Velocitech that one person is clearly calling the time. And then another person, it could be the tactician, is calling the meters to the line. And that's what I was doing. And watching that, and John's and displays there so everybody on the boat can watch how fast the meters are ticking down. But the tactician, is the last one to make the call. Okay, let's keep going, or you got to slow down. We're starting that first race kind of sailing around in the box, the starting area, about 75 meters below the line. Normally, if there's no current, it's somewhere around 45 meters or 40 meters below the line. And that just goes to show it's about double, right? Maybe a little bit less than double, because the current's pushing us up so quick. So just as a rule of thumb, if you have one person calling the line, their voice is heard just for time, and then another person calling the distance to the line, then you don't confuse the 2 numbers. So
Tim, when do we get to the point where you forget about the distance, and if you have boats above and below you and everybody's punched out at the same time, you're not going to hold back on it, are you?
You kind of have to look at the fleet, because if it's just those 2 boats, and you're over,
and the range.
Yeah, if it's everybody going, and you got to go with the pack a little bit. I agree with you, and that happened. One of the recalls today is everybody just went. They were over, but you got to keep your nose clean so you have some clear air. But if you get good pings, today was a little tricky because the boats were swinging around on both ends, so you got to build in a little bit of cushion there. But if you get good pings and the boats aren't moving around, you can really trust the box, and you can time it so you're at 0 at go. But today, I think we built in a little bit of extra because the boats were swinging around a little bit, and that's where the bow guy, comes in. And today, Danny did a great job of being, like John was saying, being the sanity check, to make sure that the box was, telling us the right thing. Yeah. So Carter, come on over. I have a question for you about tactics. So,
he doesn't care. What did you see at that little
remark? So upwind tactics. What were you looking at upwind, and what were the big factors to keep you, in the right spot?
Today. All right. So we got off the line fairly well in the first race, and had a great advantage to go left or right. We could have gone anywhere we wanted, and it looked like we had all the boats on the right. So we said, oh, well, we'll just cover all those guys. Wrong. Classic. Where did James just walked away? Yeah. So you guys just kept going left, and just went around everybody. And so it immediately clued into us that it was super geographic to current. And so we just started playing the geography of it and trying to be in the right place, which was left. And that kind of clued in pretty early. And every time we went right, we just got killed. So that's what we found. And even though, and in the second race, we went around the lure gates, and we were basically pointed at the weather mark, and said, well, let's just sail to the weather mark, and we're right there. The current will get us up there, and people got to the left of us, and they just went right around us. So there must have been a current thing. I think there was a little more breeze that side too, and so you just kind of had to get there. And sometimes you had to duck a boat to get there, or stay in some bad air to get there, and just get there and then slingshot out of that corner. That seemed to me what worked.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, Mike, downwind. What were your thoughts downwind, tactically, current-wise, breeze-wise?
So I think the reason the left was working upwind, and we didn't catch on to this right away, was that river coming past Patriots Point and everything is much stronger than anything else. So by getting left, you get into that, and you could see where it was because it got choppier. Because the current against the wind was choppier, and that was the most current. So we were watching that chop downwind, and we were watching that chop downwind on the left, and that's how we decided downwind how far to the course left we would go. So we kept trying to go lower than most and watch them kind of go into that current, into the chop, and that's why you guys saw us fight really hard to go low. We were willing to go into dirty air to do it, because I didn't want to get to that. I figured the reason the left was working was there was current advantage upwind, which has to mean current disadvantage downwind. So we fought super hard to get out of it downwind, and but we weren't quite willing to commit to a jibe over, and we just didn't like the other side either. We wanted the wind that was on the left side of the course, so we just figured we'd sag below. But anyway, that was our key, though, was that choppy water was the more current. So we kept trying to, we went artificially low to stay out of that current. And it worked. It saved our butt the first race for sure.
So choppy water upwind, smooth water downwind, basically is what you're saying. Okay. So Will, I have a question for you. Downwind, keeping the boat going, it was, breeze on where you could pull back and go go downwind, dead downwind at times, and then there were times where you had to pull forward and VMG. And so tell us a little bit about the communication on your boat when you're doing that.
So yeah, it was quite tough downwind, especially with the chop, and when you're close to other boats, it was really quite tough. So what we do on our boat is the trimmer of the spinnaker really is driving the boat downwind, and we feed off of what he says. More pressure, I tend to work it a little lower. Less when he starts talking about less pressure in the sheet, I start sailing up a little bit. The only override to that is the tactician because of a lane issue or some other reason. But we basically on the run really work off the pressure on the spinnaker sheet, and then I really work hard to get the crew weight just right. It seemed that a couple guys loaded on the weather side downwind just helped stabilize the boat, stabilize the sails a little bit from bouncing around. And once we got that trim just right, you notice big gains on the boats around you. So really work hard on that. And typically in the J24, it really never wants to heel to lure downwind. It wants to be flat, and when there's enough pressure in the sheet, it wants to be heeled to weather a little bit.
Can I ask a question so can you elaborate, Will, where is the crew sitting? And also, why no leeward heel, especially when you're having a little trouble keeping the main full?
Yeah, I think if you're...
Really likes them.
Yep, so the question was, crew weight, placement, and then why the crew on the weather rail, and why keeping the crew on the weather rail with the main not being pressurized. So the first part of that question, light air, weight pretty far forward, definitely one person in front of the mast. One thing about the J24, it's kind of like an egg, right? It just wants to do this. Weight out to the edges is really what I work for. So loading up at the tow rail, it's not halfway out, it's all the way out, right out at the lifeline with your feet on the tow rail. I like the crew balls of their feet so they can move, and you know, depending on your crew weight, you kind of decide where your crew forward goes. So if you're a heavy helmsman, you sit to leeward, then you might have your next heavy person on the weather side. I think typically having the tactician in the companionway with their feet on the cabin sole is pretty nice. And so yeah, weight forward as the breeze builds, then you start coming back, heavier air and waves. As far as the mainsail trim and the weight on the weather rail, I'm just trying to stabilize the boat. If the main doesn't have enough pull on it, it kind of tells me two things. Maybe I'm trying to sail too low, so maybe I should head up a little bit, or maybe I'm under trimming the main.
All right, any questions on any trim topics, tactics, starting? So the question is, in the breeze today in the light spots, his question was, how do you know when to heat up to go, keep the boat moving, and when do you know to turn the boat down again? And I would say Will covered a little bit of it. It's communication with the trimmer. So the trimmer has to communicate how much pressure's in the kite. The tactician and the helmsman have to work on boat speed and making sure the boat's moving through the water compared to the boats around them. So I think that communication is making sure that the boat's not slower than the boats around you, and you have the right idea. You can heat up, turn up a little bit, get a little pressure in the kite, get the boat moving. Once you do that, it actually generates a little bit of apparent wind, which is nice, because then you could even turn a little bit lower. If you get down low and then you pull back and you go dead downwind, you lose all your apparent, everything's behind you, and you're just sailing low and slow. So it's a little bit in between, and that's a good observation. I think it's important to sail that line of getting the speed up, and then the tactician or the helmsman noticing, okay, our speed's up, let's start bringing it back down again. Then the trimmer says, I'm losing pressure, and they can say something like, that's the bottom. I think that's the bottom, and then you can turn back up a couple degrees. So I think it's a good thing. I was noticing that too when I was looking at the boats in the middle of the course, especially trying to sail too low and slow. Any other questions? Sail trim, tactics, starting?
So, 3 inches off on the spreaders actually, to me, felt really tight. Were you all between 3 and 2 inches off, or with the chop and just the light air, it just seemed really tight?
We were anywhere from, I'd say, 4 to 5 in the real light stuff, just easing and bow down, to, I think John said 2 inches, about 2 inches once the breeze was on and we weren't trying to power through chop in flat water. Mike, were you the same?
Yeah, I think that's about right. We only trimmed in to that 2 or 3 inches when we felt really, really good. When everything was perfect, powered up and going. We definitely eased a bunch we'd ease maybe 4 or 5, 6 inches, even 6 inches off if the chop got bad. And then we didn't like to keep it out there. We wanted to get it back in. We were always working to try to get it in as much as we could without stalling out. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is where you what was the spreader, the car position when you were 4 inches off. So the way we set our cars was we thought it was pretty flat water for the most part, so we didn't mind having it, when we over trimmed it, we had it touch the top and the bottom at the same time. And I think when we were off a little bit, that meant it was a little further off the spreader than it was the base. Were you guys about the same?
We were conscious to be a little bit forward of that, so we were a little bit deeper at the bottom than the top, and because we felt like in the choppy stuff we needed the power, so we might have been a hair forward on the car, and especially the thing to remember is when you crack the halyard and you start getting the scallops and the light stuff, that first thing you have to think of is if I ease the halyard and light stuff and get scallops in the sail, it's time to put the car forward because the whole sail's dropping. So you have to get the car forward to get the same depth in the sail as you did when the halyard was up.
You confused me. I thought in chop you wanted to twist to kind of power through things, and you're saying close the top now.
No, twist is good, but you need to get the depth in the sail to begin with. So if it's flat and twisty, you don't generate enough power. You want to be deep and twisty, and that'll get you the power.
Then you can just sheet out more too.
Right, so you I think we get the twist from easing the sheet. You get the power from putting the lead forward. So don't confuse the two. You still do want twist, but you do want the power from putting the lead forward.
Okay, any other questions?
Sorry, I have a zillion questions, but I'll just do one more. So you talked a little bit about what you're thinking about at the start, but probably kind of the hardest conditions I've ever started in. Light air, so much current, a lot of boats. What are you doing before the start, besides the Velocitech stuff? Like, are you doing some timing of approaches to the line? What else are you thinking about in order to get a good start? I mean, and specifically, like, if somebody comes in and is taking your hole, things like that, like, what are you doing to set yourself up?
Well, I think the one thing that we do, and I'll let these guys answer the same question, is when you do your pings, you're getting really close to the committee boat, and you're getting really close to the pin boat, and at that point, everybody should be noticing on your boat how fast you're moving, and that sense of, the current pushing you by the line, and how fast that's happening. And then when we sail by, we do wind shots, or we sail by the line again, and we double check and say, do you think we're on the line? Do you think we're on the line? And we check the Velocitech, and it says, oh, we're 10 meters over. So it's just good to keep everybody thinking about where you are and how the current's affecting you. So that's one thing that happens. And then as far as the keeping your hole and making sure people don't, it's the same tactics. You do the same thing. So if one thing we do is the tactician is really looking back for anybody behind the boat, anybody that's going to come scoop your hole. So I'm pointing at these boats so John can look over his shoulder, and also to let that boat know that we see them. We know they're there. So let them know that it's not going to be easy if they want to take our hole. And then John knows that he's got to bow down and turn down and make sure that they know that we're not going to let him take the hole. And then if he does that, then we see the bow come back up again. Then John knows to turn right back up and keep protecting the hole to leeward the best he can. So it wasn't a whole lot different today than that part of it, but the part of it of setting up and being farther down in the box was huge. Well, do you do the same thing?
Same routine. I think with the current today, for the two races we had, we just really had to set up further away from the line because of the current. That was a big difference.
And just to add one more thing, you talked about timing stuff. I usually actually don't time a lot of stuff because you're really just trying to scoop somebody's hole and seeing where everybody's set up on the line. But today, I actually did because we were so far down from the box in the bottom. I want to know how long it took because I really wanted the pin end. How long it took me to get there because I didn't want to be really late because everybody I thought was going to be set up too early and I wanted to be the last one there, but I didn't want to be so last that I was, screwed and everybody's gone. So I did do at least one time and figured out, all right, this is about a minute to there. Because of all that current, it does change the game a little.
So one thing to think about with the Velocitech is, it's a GPS-based system, right? So when you're making your pings, you want to come in slow at the same angle, preferably upwind, and get your ping. If you move your bow around too much or you come in too fast, it's not going to get an accurate reading. So really try, upwind, slow, steady angle, get your ping right on the mark.
All right, any other questions? All right, thanks guys. Good luck tomorrow.
Good job.